Hey my friends, welcome back to another video that's all about worms. It's been about 4 months since I acquired a neglected worm farm and I've been trying to bring it back to life ever since. So I thought it was a good time to give a general update on what it's been like keeping worms now for 4 months, what I'm doing differently now, and what I hope to do in the future. I also outlined the ingredients of my new worm chow, my new worm bedding, and finally we sift some castings. Now that's a fun-filled day. I hope you enjoy.
Since it's been about 4 months since I first received my worms and started vermicasting, I thought I would give a general update of what it's been like for me to have worms. So, slightly unusual but very quick update, or how I got the worms was I got them secondhand, a kind of an old disregarded worm farm that didn't have many worms at all. I honestly can't even tell you how many. Might have been 1,000. I honestly don't even know. It had been a much larger population, but by the time I got it, it was much smaller. So that's what I started with. It had a bunch of funky material in it. It's taken all of these 3 or 4 months to get most of that material out, including some little bits of plastic and whatnot, but I've almost got that worked out. I've almost also gotten the bedding down where they've started to enjoy it, and that's something that I'm about to change. And I've also just recently changed their location, so they were very happy in the previous location. In these 2 particular bins, they weren't doing much roaming in their bins at all. I just moved these guys over a day ago, and we had some guys roaming, said they weren't as happy here, so we'll see what it looks like now. But I'm just going to quickly look in these bins, but at the same time I'm going to go through what it's been like over 4 months. So what can we look at? Time. So as far as time goes, you have feeding, you have checking in or aerating of the bins, and then you would have extracting of castings. So those would effectively be your major tasks. And so what does that take? Or how much time does that take? Possibly an hour a week, maybe, depending on how you're doing it. Now I spend a little more time. I put my food scraps in a blender. I've just started making worm chow. Spend a fair amount of time making my bedding because I'm hoping to expand my population. But if you're just focusing on one bin of whatever size, then it really doesn't take that much time at all. You can literally, sometimes you can feed them and you could leave them for weeks and they're just fine because there's plenty of food. Now that's kind of interesting. So the reason I was going to look in here just real quick, there's nothing remarkable here to really note, but this is my first feeding of worm chow right here from about 3 days ago. And I can see that there were definitely worms hanging out here on the top, right in it. I can just see them, so that's probably a good sign. But let's just see if there's any well, if there's many over here. Okay, oh yeah, that's a pretty good sign. Oh yeah, that's a really good sign for this bin. So that tells me all I have to know. Look at that. So that's not something that I see a ton with my food because these bins aren't that populated, but that kind of accumulation of worms right around there shows me that they really like that worm food. So that worked out well, that little test. It's only been in there a couple of days and you can see there's still more. That looks like it's mostly cornmeal. But if I look down here where the food is, let's see. Have they completely abandoned the food? That would be quite remarkable. Hey Blitz, wouldn't that be remarkable? Oh my. Oh, wow, okay. We got one guy in there, oh, a couple. These little critters. So, there's some still in there, but that's certainly, oh yeah, there's plenty of food there too. Yeah, and still not that many over there, but that proves to me that they are really attracted to that worm food. Worm chow, no question. Alright. So speaking of worm chow, the next thing that I would bring up possibly is cost. So worms these days, composting worms, are fairly expensive. I mean, relatively, for 1,000 worms, you're paying 50, 60, 70, 80 bucks, I think, or more. So there's that to get the initial worms. But once you do, very often, many of your inputs can be completely free. Cardboard, paper, leaves. And then it's up to you beyond that if you want to actually spend any more money. I've spent a little bit of money. I was making my bedding originally with coco coir, and I didn't even use a whole bag over these 4 months. So that's really only, that's really not that much of an expense, but it is one. And beyond that, I'm going to start adding a few amendments and the worm chow, which is minimal cost, but that's basically all that I've paid for. But you can really get away with basically paying nothing. Hey buddy, you want to join in? I gotta check this big bin. And then what do you get out of it, one might ask? In these 4 months, oh, don't chew on those just yet, but in these 4 months, I would say I've gotten about 3 or 4 of these. And I would expect that, so it had actually fulfilled all my worm casting needs over the last few months over the winter. But now I'm going to need more with spring coming. That's why I want to sort of ramp up production. That's why I'm looking at getting the worm chow going, just to get them reproducing, you know what I'm saying, Blitz? Get them going, if you know what I'm saying. And get them producing more castings. So that's cost. Now, last night these guys were trying to run away. Let's see if they're, how they're doing now. Oh, look at that. I'm kind of surprised. I sort of expected them to be up roaming around. Very interesting. So, and for me actually there has been a slight bit more cost in that I've had running under them most of the time a very large Mars Hydro 48-inch heat mat underneath with a sensor that goes into the bottom of this bin. Now yesterday when I first brought them out, this room's a little bit colder. This floor is a little bit colder. I put a piece of wood underneath to buffer a bit, but I think it was a little bit colder. So when I checked on them last night, they were trying to escape. So I turned up the heat mat and it looks like they are all back staying in the bin, which is beautiful. Now this bin is a combination of 2 little bins that I put together. You can see the worms scurrying away from the light, but I wanted to amalgamate my 2 bins into one so that it would be easier to extract the castings. I had them in smaller bins. This will be slightly easier because I can get the worms hopefully en masse, especially probably with this worm chow, to migrate to one side so it's easier to extract and sift the castings without all the worms in them. So this bin has been put together. I have fresh food and bedding on one side and slightly older bedding on the other side. I'm not going to do that. So I am getting ready to extract castings from both these bins. Oh, there's a little guy. So that's good news. They're not trying to escape. And as far as the update goes, that's effectively it. An hour a week. Effectively no money if you want, but you know, everybody's probably going to spend a tiny little bit of money. But you also get castings. You don't contribute to the food waste problem. So there's all kinds of pluses. I should also mention that even though I've had it in this 2x4 tent, just by coincidence I ended up putting it in there and it stayed in there. It works out pretty well. I haven't had any problem with smell, any problem with bugs other than creepy crawlies that stay in the bin. We'll see with spring and summer coming up if that's going to be a little more difficult. I suspect it will be, but at that point I might be happy it's in this tent. However, I'm looking to get these guys into a bigger, better home at some point, hopefully. We'll see how it goes, but for now, worm farming is fun. Believe me, it is. Give it a try. GoPro, stop recording. In front of me here are the 5 ingredients that I have decided that I am going to be including in my worm chow. Right here we have oats that I've ground down into a flour. I have 2 cups. Following next at 1 cup is cornmeal. I actually did grind that a bit in the magic grinder as well, down into more of a flour. Here at half a cup, we have alfalfa meal. I didn't process this in any way. I'm going to leave it just as it is. Then there'll be slightly different size granules, and they'll decompose at slightly different times. Here I have crushed eggshell, and beside it I have glacial rock dust. Both of them are 2 tablespoons or 1/8 of a cup, and I'll be using those for grit, among all the beautiful trace minerals that are in there that will eventually end up in my castings. So this is my worm chow, first try at it, so it is an experimental recipe. We'll see how it goes, how they like it. That's it for now. GoPro, stop recording. I am about to make some new worm bedding, and I'm very happy to announce that after several months, finally the worms are enjoying the bedding that I'm preparing for them. So obviously the thing I must do then is change it. And that's what I'm gonna do. So the only reason, one and only reason, is I'm swapping out cocoa for peat moss. So I'm bringing peat moss in, getting rid of the cocoa, and part of the reason, the only reason really, basically, yeah, I'd use cocoa if it was more accessible and more affordable. So I can get this bale of peat moss for 15 bucks. I've yet to use it, so we'll see how it works out. But to get cocoa, sometimes I can get my hands on bricks, sometimes not. But a bag is, a bag a quarter the size is double the price. So I'm gonna try peat moss, and hopefully my worms are gonna love it. But otherwise, everything else is the same, which I'll go through real super quick. I have soaking here just little cardboard strips, soaking up there nicely. And in here I have coffee grounds. It actually happens to be decaf, which apparently works better. So in here, my magic ingredient is leaf litter, which I've strained mostly through a 1/4 inch. You can see a couple little pine things there, which is unfortunate. But in here I just have a little bit of worm castings that I happen to have that I'll throw in for an inoculant. But before I use this, I'll be putting more in, and that is effectively it. I will be adding some lime to counteract the acidity of the peat moss, but otherwise the recipe's the same. I'm going to put it together and let it cook for a while to make my worms happy. Alright, that's it. GoPro, stop recording. So I am about to sift some castings from my larger bin, and I'm very impatient. I should wait a bit for the horizontal migration to work a little bit better, which is the reason that I put them in this bigger bin. However, I do want to get the castings out and start them drying and clearing and get some of them out of this bin. But here, oh, you might not be able to tell. Nope, they're gone. I put some of the worm chow that I created over here yesterday, and it was just full of worms there. They really like that stuff, and so I'll have to figure out how much I would want to give them to as not overfeed them. However, it is now a great tool to get them to move where I want them to. So I'm still using this thing that I built out of a drawer and 1/4 inch hardware cloth, and it's still working fine. I'm gonna look for something at the point where I'm larger than what I have now. I'll look just to automate this in some way. But the idea with the bigger bin was to be able to load one side with food and get many of the worms to go. Now, like I said, I I don't have the patience to wait. So there are some worms in here, but not that many, considering. Fairly low populated, but I don't know if you can tell, but there's lots of castings in there. Still plenty of other stuff as well, debris. Probably not much for food, but there's lots of cardboard and whatnot. So this is just a bit of an extraction, just to get some of these castings out and replace them with better bedding and better bedding. Lots of cardboard in there. So, little shake, not so bad, guys. Not so bad. And, oh, there's a little feller. Here, fella. Sorry, dude. Stress them out here. But they're hard to pick up sometimes. Oh, there's another one right there. They're so slippery. Well, fella, help me out here. Here we go. Sorry for the stress. I'll get a better method, I promise. Yeah, so really not that many worms over here, which is good, because it is, as you might be able to tell, full of stuff. It could really stand to be cleared out a lot by the worms, but it is also so dense in castings that I'd like to clear some of those out. Oops. And let's get down into this corner. Hopefully we don't take the same worm in a few times. That would just be mean. Alright, guys. Still food there. There is lots of food in here. Lots of food. Okay. I'm gonna stop right there. And just checking out the process. Now I will do a better job, or take a little more time, wait a little bit longer, and let more worms migrate to the food side, and then we will be able to do this a little bit easier without the worms. Now I'm going to check the castings and check them for worms, because there'll undoubtedly be few in there, but here we go. Now definitely can refer to this as vermicompost, because screening it at a 1/4 inch, you can see predominantly castings. There's a cocoon right there. There's little pieces of organic matter. It looks like little wood bits or pine needles, and a worm. The worm will go back in. But otherwise, that's some really nice rich castings, among other things. So we'll let that dry out a little bit. Pick out the worms, and then in maybe a week or so, I'll look to see if I can get some castings out of both of these bins. All right, that's where we are at in the sifting world. GoPro, stop recording.
Okay, my friends, that's it for this update from the wonderful world of worms. We'll see you next time.